Okay, so I want to do a bit of a disclaimer for today's stream. This section, in my opinion, could be the most important section of the review. It's dealing with matters of economics and some of the fundamental mechanisms and relationships of the NDIS. Now, if I were taking my time with this, I'd actually break out the economics textbooks, specific articles, and studies on economics and disabled economics and poverty lines and such. But that might be better done when I do a recap video of some sort or another, which I am hoping to do. Also, I do need to get through this as quickly as possible in readiness for the town hall meeting that is in like 2 days. So I'm going to apologize. I am not going to be providing citations for what I'm about to say. This is all off the cuff memory stuff. But enough with the disclaimer. Let's just get started. So, markets and support systems that empower people with disability. Recommendation 10. Invest in digital infrastructure for the NDIS to enable accessible, timely, and reliable information and streamline processes that strengthen NDIS market functioning and scheme integrity. 10.1. The Australian Government should develop and fund an easy to use centralised online platform that provides information on all locally available supports and services for participants and navigators. The NDIA and the National Disability Supports Quality and Safeguards Commission should enable better two-way information sharing with third-party online platforms to encourage digital innovation that builds on the centralised online platform. The NDIA should transition to fully electronic payments and improve visibility of NDIS payments. Yes. 10.4. The Australian Government should invest in the underpinning digital infrastructure and capability needed to protect the integrity of the NDIS. Yes. Yes. If I'm right, that would be everything to do with, say, cybersecurity. And also using, just up-to-date hardware and up-to-date software. What is it? I think over in the UK, the NHS, the National Health System there, is rooted in Windows 95. We do not want that sort of thing happening over here in Australia with our disability systems. Obviously, that wouldn't be the case now because, at the very least, it would be Windows 10. But the point still stands is getting the digital infrastructure, software and hardware up to speed is important, especially for long term and especially for modern cybersecurity. 10.5. The Australian Government should develop and implement a clear transition path for existing plan managers. The Australian Government, 10.6, the Australian Government should design and roll out an NDIS digital transformation strategy and roadmap to bring together and sequence all initiatives in the NDIS digital landscape. My biggest concern here is that they don't actually specify anything to do with cybersecurity. Like, that is actually a really big deal if you're dealing with digital setup like that, and I'm not seeing it here. Maybe that'll be in a different recommendation, or maybe it's supposed to be covered by Australia's cybersecurity and the legislation in regards to that. But those are woefully not underfunded, but out of date. So, yeah, cybersecurity, please make that a priority. Here we go. 11. Perform pricing and payments framework to improve incentives for providers to deliver quality supports to participants. Okay, I'm going to have opinions on this. Let's see what they actually say, though. 11.1. The Department of Social Services should develop a new NDIS pricing and payments framework, yes, to be administered by the National Disability Insurance Agency and the Independent Health and Aged Care Pricing Authority, including better ways to pay providers to promote the delivery of efficient and quality supports and continuity of supply. Okay, I'm going to come back to this because I want to see the whole thing. 11.2, the NDIA should progressively roll out preferred provider arrangements for capital supports to better leverage its buying power and streamline access for participants. 11.3, the Australian Government should transition responsibility for advising on NDIS pricing to the Independent Health and Aged Care Pricing Authority to strengthen transparency, predictability, and alignment. Yes. 11.4, the Australian Government should review and refine the pricing and payments framework once underpinning reforms have been implemented. Okay, so I'm concerned by this. I know I just said a whole bunch of yeses, but those yeses were mostly to do with transparency, and that's about it. The Independent Health and Aged Care Pricing Authority is good. Like, it's good for them to have a hand in this and be part of the conversation, of course. But a lot of the problems with NDIS are in the economics. And I'm glad that they're going to be developing a new pricing and payments framework because they need to. It's one of the most important things that needs to happen. So let me give you a couple of quick examples of both some issues in the system and a couple of potential solutions here. And the solutions are going to be very much in quotation marks because there's a lot of conversation and a lot of nuance to any supposed solution. But so there is an issue. So let's say that a care worker, all right, you're going to pay a care worker on the NDIS, and the way the NDIS works is it gives a price ceiling for not everything, but a lot of things. And for care workers, that price ceiling is around about $67, $70. It depends on exactly what time of day and whether it's a weekend shift or whatever. Weekend shifts are much higher. But let's just go with, say, $70 right now, because it mostly floats around that line. So that's the price cap. Now, what that means is that, in theory, all of the NDIS providers should be selling the services for less than up to that number. But in reality, as you would probably expect, instead what they do is all of them sell the same, the service, the care service, for $70. It is the standard price. Everybody does the same price, which means you don't actually have competition on the price because it's all the same number. But now, one of the problems with price caps, it's not so much the problem, it's one of the intended effects of price caps, is that by putting a price cap on something, such as a utility or a service, the idea is that you guarantee a low price for consumers, and companies have to diversify their assets in order to make a profit. Now, that's the theory, right? Except let's have a look at it in practice. The minimum wage for care workers is around $28 to $30 an hour, depending on what qualifications they have. Let's say that, and most care workers tend to get paid around $35, give or take, depending on circumstance. If you have got a price cap of $70, what that means, if you're paying, say, $30, $35 for the care worker, the rest of the money goes to the company. So if they're only paying their care worker $30, they're making $40. If they're paying $35, they're making $35. If they're paying a care worker $40 because that care worker is very highly qualified, has got university's degrees and everything, then they're only making $30, which means you've got a system that fundamentally incentivizes businesses to only hire low-quality staff, to only hire staff that'll take the lower paycheck, because that means they're guaranteeing for themselves a higher base income for the company, right? Which fundamentally encourages high turnover rates, the use of, and this is not an anti-immigrant statement, by the way, at all, but it encourages companies to exploit immigrants. It encourages them to go, hey, we're not going to hire somebody who will demand the higher rate. We're going to hire people who are more desperate, are more likely to take the lower price value, who don't necessarily know this culture well enough and all their legal protections well enough. And also, especially people who are in the country and are on a visa and may only be here for a year or two, which means that they don't have to worry about that person's pay increasing over years and or decades of service, because that person will go and they'll just get another person. But what that means is that you've now got a system that fundamentally means that with all these price caps across a lot of different areas, the companies are finding ways to shortchange their staff and, by extension, shortchange their clients in order to profit more from the funds. Now, that is an inherent part of sticking a price ceiling on something like this. Arguably, a better way that they could do things, and I would love to see this implemented myself would be to do something like, say, and I don't know what the exact most appropriate figures would be, but do something like, say, okay, the cost of to NDIS must be the wage of the care worker plus, say, 75%. And that's the cap. So if the company wants to make more money, they need to be hiring more expensive staff, which incentivizes that company to get staff that are worth that higher pay wage. Now, that is, in my opinion, the best situation for everybody, because you're incentivizing, everything is incentivizing give the client high quality care. Even like the amount of money that the company receives at the end of the day is based on incentivized care. Now, whether it would be, say, 75% or even 100%, you pay your care worker $30, the company gets paid $30, they get $60 in total. That is still, you can see that that's already cheaper than the current setup. And sure, a lot of companies might not like that because they're banking on getting a lot of money from the excess cost that they can just pocket for the company and not pay the care workers as much. But I don't think that's what we want. I know that, one of the problems, this is one of the fundamental problems with NDIS, but I understand why it was there. When NDIS started, right, in the first couple years of NDIS, the economic structure needed to guarantee income, needed to mitigate risk, minimize risk, and guarantee success for new startup companies. Now, in my opinion, they should have actually just gone with business grants and set up an entire set of branch of business grants in order to help new companies get on their feet. But instead, what they went was go, hey, all these companies, if you invest in providing care, we guarantee you profits. Guaranteed profits. There's no risk. We are guaranteeing profits. And this is one of many ways that they did that. And other ways that they did that was in the uncapped areas. For example, I have already told the story about how respite homes can be $2,000 a day. 1 week in that respite home is like a year of rent in some places. Quite literally, it cost me $22,000 for 1 week. Because it was actually over $2,000. I just used $2,000 because that shocks people slightly more than the real number. But, $22,000 for 7 days is what I was charged. And that is an insane amount of money for 7 days in a house. Things like that should be capped. Things like that should be regulated. Things like that probably shouldn't be being run by private companies in the first place. But they are. And one of the things, and this is the unwritten justification. This is the best justification I've been able to find. I've never found anything officially supporting this or officially going against this. But if you set up a system like that, the $22,000 that I paid for 1 week is $22,000 that, in theory, is going to supporting other clients, is going to buy more technology, is investing in the company buying another house for the purposes of being a respite home, and thus easing the load for disabled people in general. The problem is that, one, there is no guarantees that they are going to spend the money that way. That $22,000 could just as easily go into the pocket of CEOs and shareholders. We're done here. But also, that $22,000 should have gone to government housing. Just outright, that should have gone to government housing. And it's a lot of the justifications that I can think of for why the pricing scheme is the way it is fundamentally risk mitigation in order to encourage the private sector to actually provide these services. But that is fundamentally the wrong way to do these things for a long list of reasons. There's a lot of economic theories regarding the strengths and weaknesses of privatization of services, especially essential services. And one of the so-called strengths is the private sector will offer competition, which the competitive element should actually keep the price down. But when you fix the prices, when you put these price ceilings on, you're eliminating competition, and the only area that they can compete on is actually shortchanging their staff and thus providing a worse experience. And because this is such an essential service, it's really hard, and because disabled people are among the most vulnerable, it's really hard to change from one service provider to another service provider who may be just as abusive or more so, especially when there is no transparency in reputation, when there is basically no enforcement of any criminal act. Like, sure, there is a certain amount of enforcement of, oh, hey, look, this company is doing these criminal activities. It takes months or years for these things to get followed up on and for a company to actually get penalized. And if you have one owner, and this has happened multiple times, it's still happening. You have one owner who actually owns 4 different companies, and all of them are doing these sorts of abusive tactics. Oh no, one of them had got hit. The courts got them, and they were forced to shut down one of them. They've still got 3 others, and there's nothing stopping them from opening another one. Like, there's nothing against the person. There's nothing against the people involved. It's just the company that can just be dissolved and a new one put in its place with all the exact same staff, if they wanted. So, it's hugely problematic. But bringing it back to what's here, transparency is good. Doing a new pricing framework is good, and it could solve the issue. But you see nothing here about what they're planning on transforming it into, about what direction they're planning to take here. And it's entirely possible that they could actually come up with a system that is worse than the current system. It is a huge balancing act, and a lot of my submissions to Shorten's office have been revolving around this sort of thing in one way or another. Either it's been hey, maybe give the money directly to the participants. That has pros and cons. There are cons to giving money directly to participants, and that is if, fundamentally, if your private sector is what is providing the services, if the private sector doesn't have the guarantees, they'll pull out. Which means that especially people who are on the, are more high needs, who need the more expensive needs, giving them the money themselves is great. It is absolutely great, and it would get rid of the NDIS price gouging situation, because it wouldn't be NDIS funds, it would be that person's funds. And they could spend it on treatment if they wanted, if it was their own money. Yes, they could spend it on other things as well, but statistically speaking, disabled people and people in desperate situations, they spend the money where it's most important to be spent. Trust-based economics really work for people who are in poverty, and that is where you want trust-based economics all the time. Every time it shows up that way. Anyway, but the point is that if you've only got a couple of companies that are providing a given service, and now they can't guarantee their profits, they might stop providing that service. But the flip side, and this is why I don't think that that's necessarily such a big deal, one, if somebody needs very expensive services and you're just giving them the money, they can get the next best thing, or they can spend it on, oh, I haven't been approved for a wheelchair, I can spend the money on a wheelchair regardless of the approval, because I can actually get that thing. They can spend it on the other things that they need. Until they're able to spend it on that thing. Or they might be able to do something and go, oh no, I need this very expensive thing, it's not available in my area. That's okay, I've got enough money, thanks to NDIS, to send myself over to where the thing is and get that treatment item, specialized service, whatever. Yes, there are choices, there will always be trade-offs, but the other side of the argument is, if you're in a rural area, it doesn't matter, you're already not getting access to these things. So just giving that person the money gives them the ability to access those things, because now, It's like, oh, look, here's this person, they're in a rural area, they've been given a budget of $1 million. Let's just say that because there are a few people in rural areas who get that sort of budget because their needs are so darn high. If we just give them the $1 million, one of the things that they could spend that money on is a house. A house in a more urbanized area. A house in a more urbanized area where the supports they need are actually located. That is not a thing that they can do at the moment, especially if their income at the moment, if they are on DSP, which hopefully they would be, but there's no guarantee because some people who should be on the DSP are not. If they're only earning about $28,000 a year, I think that's what the DSP is at the moment. If they're only earning $28,000 a year, they're never going to be able to afford to move to where the services are that they need. But if they've been approved of a plan for $1 million, and they get given that $1 million to spend however they please, they can now afford to physically relocate to a house in the neighborhoods that they actually need it to be, and can potentially have enough money left over that they can either make sure that they buy a house that is disability friendly, or they have enough money to do the renovations to make said house disability friendly. There's no lose to that scenario. The only possible lose is some specific providers just won't provide certain services anymore. But that is actually mitigated if the people can actually spend the money themselves so that they can get themselves to those things. Now, that doesn't cover everything. I cannot think of a solid counterpoint, but I'm sure that exists. I'm sure that there are going to be some disabled people who would say, who would respond to me and say, actually, that wouldn't help me in my situation. Having this pre-budgeted economic situation is actually better for some reason. I cannot honestly conceive of a situation where the pre-allocated budget is better than just giving the person the money. One of the things I actually proposed to, I'm going off on tangent here, one of my propositions directly to Shorten's office was give every single person currently on NDIS the following deal. Either they can keep their plan as it stands and they will be treated the same way, or take 50% and it's your money. So if your plan is about $30,000 to $40,000, which is about the average for somebody on autism who's autistic, then here, have $15,000, have $20,000. Either take the plan that we've set up for you, that is pre-allocated, or take 50% of that budget and that is your money. Spend it how you want, how you need. I think a lot of people on NDIS would take the 50%. In a heartbeat, they would take the 50%. Maybe not everybody. There's going to be some people who would prefer the higher value because they know that they need the higher value and the system around that would be better. But for so many people, having the cash in hand means that they can achieve so much more. Especially, it means that they can access treatment. Which may mean that they don't need the NDIS in future if they can afford the treatment. So, that is one of the propositions. Now, that proposition does have some flaws. As I said, if you start giving people cash, some providers may not provide, and blah, blah, blah. There is a little bit of give and take there. But on the whole, imagine if half of all people on the NDIS took that deal. That financial blowout of how expensive the NDIS is? Well, that would drop. If they're spending half the money, then they're spending half the money. So, that is one of my personal proposals. I have given it a lot of thought. I can see some pros and cons, but a lot of those pros and cons fundamentally come down to this is the current structure of the private market. We just have to work on that structure on the private side of things. And a lot of that comes down to enforcing protections for disabled people, actually checking up on these providers. a whole lot of these different things, and just again, a lot of problems are actually solved if you give the disabled person the money, because it's their money. Now, there are, like, one of the biggest counterpoints is, hey, what if the disabled person isn't good at managing money? Well, that's what financial plan managers are for. And you know what financial plan managers can do when you just give the disabled person money with no strings attached? They can advise savings options. Like, think about it. One of the issues that I know I'm personally and a lot of other disabled people are going to have for the rest of their lives is, given that the DSP is below the poverty line, remembering that the poverty line for disabled people is about $36,000 a year, and we're only receiving $28,000. That's because of the increased cost of medication and things like that, on top of everything. We do not have the possibility for retirement, ever. At some point, we're going to turn 65, we're going to lose the disability pension, and we're going to be shifted over to the old age system. And, like, that is, like, after years of being in poverty, below the poverty line, struggling to make do, we're now going to have to deal with the old age side of that same situation, where we will still be poverty, and not getting treatment, and not being, like, all of these, like, it could be solved by just giving more money. And like, this isn't simply just give them more money, because remember, if you gave people the offer of 50% of what they are currently receiving in a pre-budgeted way that is designed to only go to certain private companies, if you gave the disabled person half of that value, everyone in the economy benefits. Absolutely everybody. The disabled person can get treatment, the disabled person is more equipped and more able to do things, and of course, if the disabled person is someone who's just like, look, I want to do this treatment, it's too expensive, I'm just going to start saving funds so that I can afford that treatment, or I want to actually be able to give gifts to people, I want to help, I want to help build the disabled community, or just be more involved in their own community. Like, again, sorry, this is a major tangent here, but, like, if I wanted to go, to a social event, if I wanted to go, let's say, if I wanted to go to a convention, right? I'm a massive nerd, I have written RPGs, I'm working on a board game at the moment, I would love to be able to actually go to conventions and take these things to conventions. I can't, because I'm too disabled to do so, and I can't afford to pay anybody to actually do it for me. But I also can't afford to attend the conventions. Even if I have the care workers, even if I have all the supports in place, I don't have money in my bank account to actually pay for the ticket. I would happily, juggle some funds in order to attend some of these conventions, but I can't, because I just don't have the funds to begin with. And if I'm able to go to these conventions, now I'm part of those communities. Now I'm actually engaged with those communities. Now I can actually support other creatives. There's so much more I can do if the money is my money and not pre-allocated for me in ways that I may not even be able to spend. So, yeah, bringing it back to, that is why, some of many reasons why this, is a thing, but we'll see. I've kind of jumped the gun a little bit, because this is all stuff I kind of wanted to talk more at the end. But let's keep reading and see if any of the stuff that I've just talked about is actually addressed. So, Recommendation 12, embed, promote, and incentivize continuous quality improvement in the market, supported by a dedicated quality function in the new Disability Supports Quality and Safeguards Commission. So, hopefully, this will actually cover some things. 12.1. The Australian Government should establish and appropriately resource a quality function within the National Disability Supports Quality and Safeguards Commission, led by a dedicated Deputy Commissioner for Qual? I'm not sure what that's... I'm assuming that's supposed to be quality, but that... Okay. 12.2. The new National Disability Supports Quality and Safeguards Commission should make quality improvement a priority in capacity building initiatives and audit processes. 12.3. The National Disability Supports Quality and Safeguards Commission, working with the Department of Social Services, should design, test, and implement an approach to measure and publish metrics of registered provider performance. That would be really good. That is something that is lacking at the moment. Remember what I said about, it's hard to transfer from one company to another because you've got no idea what the new territory you're going into is to begin with. Constantly, we're in a state of essentially better the devil you know than the devil you don't. Except it's the devil. You know, it's at the devil you know, and the other which could be better or worse, and you have no idea and no effective way of checking or testing. That is what this would help out with a lot. So, yeah, let's keep going. Recommendation 13. Strengthen market monitoring. Yes. And responses to challenge in coordinating the NDIS market. Okay. The Australian Government, 13.1, the Australian Government should undertake more active evidence-driven market monitoring to identify issues with access to quality supports early and take more timely and appropriate action. Yes. Yes, just outright. 13.2, the NDIA should progressively roll out provider panel arrangements for allied health supports in small and medium rural towns or where participants face persistent supply gaps. Yes, absolutely. But again, I want to point out that that's not always the right solution. I think it is, right? If they maintain the current economic structure of the NDIS, which I've already pointed out that there are problems with it, then that is the correct thing to do. If you change the economic structure, then this is still a good thing to do. It just would look quite different. So, once again, we're talking about the implementation, but the implementation of this would fundamentally change based on other points. So, I kind of look forward to seeing what happens with that one, because that will be reliant on a bunch of other points. Anyway, the NDIA should develop matching tools to support participants and navigators to pool demand for supports. Look, yes. Being able to pool supports is useful from a logistics standpoint, but I feel that would actually help providers far more than it would help participants, and it could lead to abuses, because it could lead to the situation where, oh, look, we're just going to give this group, 2 or 3 support workers, and oh, you're telling me that the support workers haven't been trained in how to deal with this particular disability? Doesn't matter, because the focus was pooling resources, not ensuring that those resources were appropriate or qualified. So that could be a problem if it's implemented poorly. But again, it's not the worst suggestion. I think it could be good. I just have concerns about it. 13.4. All Australian governments through the Disability Reform Ministerial Council should agree and publish a provider of last resort policy to ensure participants have continued access to supports where markets fail. So this is where I look at it and go, so why are you relying on the private market in the first place? Just, if you're doing this thing on the idea that, oh, hey, we should have a backup plan in case the private market fails, that's what public services are supposed to do to begin with. If you change the NDIS and just went, okay, no, we're actually going to provide a public service, because remember, on pretty much the entirety of the NDIS is public funds for private services. If they actually provided public services, that would be what this is. Now, this could be an interesting, not underhanded, but subtle way to kind of start slowly building up a public service, public provided alternatives. And that could be great, but they should actually base the changes around that. That should be the focus, that should be the goal if they want to do that. Not just a last minute add-on that ultimately is probably only going to benefit politicians. Because again, where's it going to be? Oh, it's almost certainly going to be centered around urban environments. Oh, which urban environments are they going to focus on? Well, they're probably going to focus on, right in the city centres, and of course, the highest priority is always going to be to the wealthier clients and the political clients. So, this is the problem of the private market. That is always where it goes. And if, like, even if you're going, like, yeah, like, the government is going to be trying to cover this because they're going to be limited and because they're going to have less supports. Like, the logistics of supporting the rural areas, they're just not going to have the budget to actually send the supports out that far. And if they did, we wouldn't be using the private system. It baffles me that this isn't the default, that this isn't the main argument, because having it here shows why it's so important. So, yeah, great. 13.4, great. Why aren't you every point? Is basically the thing I'm trying to say here. Recommendation 14. Improve access to supports for First Nations participants across Australia and for all participants in remote communities through alternative commissioning arrangements. Yes, absolutely. I'm concerned that it's only 1 point here. 14.1. The NDIA, in partnership with First Nations representatives, communities, participants, and relevant government agencies, should progressively roll out alternative commissioning arrangements for both First Nations communities and remote communities starting as soon as possible. Look, I absolutely agree with that, and that is a priority. I have already spoken about how, like, rural communities often get shortchanged in almost every respect, and First Nations communities get shortchanged even more often in all the same areas. And that's before you start talking about cultural clash and just the way that the First Nations communities are organized and how they support each other, and that doesn't actually mesh with how the NDIS does things. And it concerns me that it's bundled together. It's entirely possible, and that might be what this is evidence of, it might be entirely possible that these issues all overlap so much that they can be treated together, but to my knowledge that they can't. Like, there are some fundamental differences between what First Nations peoples need and what they're actually receiving, as opposed to simply rural. So, it concerns me that there's only 1 point here. This is an important point, but where's the rest? Especially given, like, some of these other things that we've seen have had a lot of points for relatively simple things. It can, like, why is it only the one? I want to see more structure around that. I want to see more information. And that may be because, hey, we haven't had enough conversation with First Nations to do that, but then where's the stuff for the remote side of that? That confuses me. And I know that they said at the start that they were deliberately putting an emphasis on First Nations, but I'm not seeing that emphasis. Like, it's great that they get this, but it's only 1 point. What? Anyway, recommendation 15. Attract, retain, and train a workforce that is responsive to participant needs and delivers quality supports. Okay, I'm going to talk about this. The Australian government should design and trial workforce attraction and retention initiatives. 15.2, the Australian government should develop targeted and flexible migration pathways for care and support workers. 15.3, the Australian government should develop an integrated approach to workforce development for the care and support sector. Alright, so there's two problems with this. The first one is the one that I've already said, which is that under the current economic structure with the price caps and the low risk and the profit that is not tied to the employee input, you have the problem that these companies really, really love people who are coming here on visas, who are short-term stays, who are only just sufficiently qualified, but not overly qualified, or, even sufficiently qualified is like the bare minimum on paper, not necessarily qualified in the specific disabilities they're dealing with. Again, I point out that there are basically no care workers who are properly qualified in my disability. There's a lot of crossover where some care workers can transition over to dealing with my disability really, really well, but those tend to be very high qualified care workers who have very, very specific and extensive backgrounds so that they're able to mix and match things that they've learned before. If they've only done a Cert 3 or a Cert 4, or even a degree, that's not going to be enough to deal with my disability. And that's even assuming other things are in place for that person that they can deal with my disability. I've had care workers who physically can't do the job. And that is no shame on them. It's just that they physically are unable to do the job. But that one side was all of that, the getting qualified staff to begin with, and the fact that currently the companies are incentivized not to do that. But the other part of the problem is if they're hiring people who are doing this, a lot of the people who do care work, it's a stepping stone. A lot of them plan to become nurses. A lot of them plan to become doctors. Some of them plan to move into admin to begin with. But a lot of them are doing care work as we do a few years as a care worker and then move on to something else. It's a transitionary step in their employment. It is not necessarily their career goal. And that is a problem because while, yes, you can do a lot to attract the workers, it's hard to retain workers when they're either here on a visa and likely to leave after a few years, or they're only there short term while they improve their skills for their actual dream job. And this is a problem because one of the flip sides is, hey, hiring friends, hiring people from a community, hiring people, for the record, I'm not a great big fan of charities and church groups, right? There's reasons that I'm not a big fan of them. Again, it's often actually economic and or abuse related reasons. But they can and often do good. It's not just that. It's also the fact that they're a Band-Aid solution. You can't, it's not just a Band-Aid solution. It's a Band-Aid solution that makes people go, oh, the problem is solved, moving on. I have some large problems with a lot of those sorts of mentalities. But those groups tend to have high retention within the group. Why? Because they're diversified. They're dealing with a lot of different things. And the people who enter into those groups, they're not looking to go and do something else. They may already have their dream job. They're just doing this on the side. And that is great. You want to encourage that. But in order to do that in this sort of a setup, you've got the problem of if people are treating it as a stepping stone, or if they're only here on visas, and those are the two dominant parts, we need to have the money going to friends, relations, communities, families, so on and so forth, which is something that the money is currently not supposed to do. Not without very, very, very specific arrangements, but you're not supposed to be able to spend the money on friends and family. And just as a point of comparison here, I have ranted in the past about how my budget, if I were to be given what is actually being recommended, my budget would be $1.4 million because I need 2-to-1 24-hour care according to how the system is developed, the laws for OH&S and insurance and all that sort of thing. Which means that for the past 10 years, my family has been providing $1.4 million of care every single year. If they have been doing that for me, yes, I would love to freaking repay them. Financially repay them for the time and monetary and physical costs. The physical health of every member of my family has declined because they've had to deal with me and my disability. Yes, I would like to be able to find a way to support my family, not just be a member of the family. I would love to be able to support my family, which is not something NDIS currently allows. And on top of that, 24-hour care, it makes things worse around here. It is helpful in some regards, but my mum, my sister, my dad, and myself even, we all have our own various trust issues. We don't necessarily want people 24/7 so on and so forth. And so me getting care is a negative impact on everybody in this household. It stresses everybody else. Um, it makes the dogs go barking all the time, especially when there's just a, hey, look, it's another new person. Um, we have had in, like, it hasn't happened in a long time, but we have had care workers steal, like, jewelry has gone missing. And it's not just jewelry, there's other stuff as well. Um, some of my stuff has gone missing. I'm not actually convinced that that is related to care workers, but like some significant expensive items of mine have disappeared. Um, all these sorts of things are things like these sort of security issues, like they're stressing us out, and we keep having to train new care workers. And who has to train the care? My mum has to train them. So just receiving the care is a massive toll on the family. And again, if my budget, if the care is worth $1.4 million, why can I not pay that to my family, given that my family are still doing most of the job? My care workers at the moment, because they can't actually lift me, because it needs two of them. If I have an episode, my mum still has to get woken up in the middle of the night to come deal with it, or my dad, or my sister, you know? And so, even though I've got care workers, my family is still doing most of the job with the care workers here. Because all the care workers are doing, realistically speaking, is recording what happened and waking my family up so my family can deal with it. And that's it. That is most of what they're doing. Not always. Some of my care workers are actually really good and they actually actively help out, and they know what they're doing sufficiently to actually help out. But they're helping my family do the job. They're not doing the job and having my family help them. And yeah, it's like, anyway, bringing it back to retention. Yeah, the retention element is going to be hard. And there are ways to solve that, but it requires a lot. Um, and there go the dogs. Anyway, recommendation 16. Sorry, I normally have the door closed, and so it's usually harder to hear them, but I forgot to close it today. Anyway, recommendation 16. Deliver safeguarding that is empowering and tailored to individuals, their service needs, and environments. I'm glad that they're including environment. Action 16.1. The Disability Reform Ministerial Council should agree a disability support ecosystem safeguarding strategy to coordinate activities to support the safeguarding of people with a disability. That sounds really good, actually. I have an issue. I do have one issue relating to that. I will get to that in a moment, though. It shouldn't be an issue, but it is an issue. 16.2. The NDIS should design, pilot, and implement a new individual risk assessment and safeguard building process. 16.3. The Department of Social Services, working with the National Disability Insurance Agency, the new National Disability Supports Quality and Safeguards Commission, and other agencies where relevant, should ensure participants can consider and access a wider range of safeguarding supports. Yeah, 16.4. State and territory governments with supports from the Department of Social Services should ensure participants can access high-quality, nationally consistent community visitor scheme offerings that interface with the NDIS. 16.5. State and territory governments should establish or improve adult safeguarding agencies to deliver a universal service of offering for the safeguarding of all people at risk of harm, including people with disability. Alright, so my first question is, are you telling me this isn't the case already? How is that not the case already? Isn't this actually stuff that's already in the legislation and in the NDIS? I totally get that it needs improving. Absolutely needs improving. But it seems weird that a lot of these statements seem to be, we need to make this a thing, not we need to improve this thing. But I want to come back to disability support ecosystem safeguarding strategy. So, one of the issues that I had personally, and it was a major, major issue, still is an issue, is the NDIS does not support treatment. They will not support treatment. They refuse to support treatment. care workers count as treatment. Now, this is the thing. This is something that it's not quite unique to my disability, but the only major publications on my disability have a major focus on ecosystem, on creating a stress-free environment, managing the ecosystem, managing that environment, and supporting through care workers and a care team. That is not only it's at the basis of all treatment plans that currently exist, that is the bulk of the treatment plan. The treatment plan is literally have some care workers. And because the NDIS is like, we will not support treatment, I was like, it would be really, really stupid if the NDIS took this angle. It would mean that they did any amount of research on my condition to begin with, and that would actually be a plus, I suppose. But when you start talking about the ecosystem, in regards to disability, that's usually a part of treatment plans. So you could run into issues where the stated thing about the NDIS, which is they will not spend money on treatment, a whole lot of things that currently are under the NDIS could count as being under treatment. So, like, heck, training can count as treatment depending on the situation, especially if that is something your therapist recommends. There's a lot of stuff like that I'm just like, hey, maybe the restriction on you cannot spend this on treatment is stupid. And not only is it stupid, but it causes very, very unnecessary complications all over the place. And so, yeah, adding that here really, it makes me concerned of, hey, look, you can say that, but that seems to actually go against the fundamental principles of the NDIS. I don't agree with that principle of the NDIS, but if you don't fix that principle, this feels like it's a completely useless statement. So, yeah. Anyway, still got a bit to go. Ooh, that's a nice one. 17. Develop and deliver a risk-proportionate model for the visibility and regulation of all providers and workers, and strengthen the regulatory response to long-standing and emerging quality and safeguard issues. Legislative change required. Yes! Oh, that makes me happy. That makes me really happy to see. Let's see if I remember the legislation when they start talking about it. 17.1. The Department of Social Services and the new National Disability Support Quality and Safeguards Commission should design and implement a graduated risk-proportionate regulatory model for the whole provider market. Yes? I want to I want to say yes. I really want to say yes. I think that it is a yes. Most ways that I could imagine this being implemented would be a yes, but I could see that being abused. Hopefully it wouldn't be, but I could see it. It's not even that I could see it being abused. I could see, because I'm a big fan of regulation for the top down. The higher you are, the bigger the company, the more powerful it is, the more powerful the individual, the more regulation should apply. And I agree that regulation should be a thing. I am just concerned that this would actually hit the lower end more than the higher end, and if it's hitting the lower end the most, it might cause a lot more problems. Yeah. But that risk proportionate regulation. Look, I think that this is a good thing. I do think that this is a good thing. I think. 17.2. The Department of Social Services and the new Disability Supports Quality and Safeguards Commission should develop a staged implementation approach to transition to the new graduated risk-proportionate regulatory model. I see that, and that tells me should develop. It tells me that they don't actually have anything yet. They might have some ideas, but it hasn't been fleshed out. Which is arguably a good thing, because hopefully it means they're taking their time on it. But I would have loved to have seen a proposition accompanying this. And heck, there may be a proposition, I just haven't seen it yet. Just should develop, suggest that there isn't one. 17.3, the Australian government should amend the National Disability Insurance Scheme Act 2013 to remove the link between a participant's financial management of their plan and the regulatory status of their support providers. Okay? Um, I agree with that. Um, that is the change to the legislation. I'm just trying to remember what the legislation specifically says on that front. I'm not going to go pull it up this time. That would take me way too long to locate everything. Um, yeah, look, I believe that that's a good thing, but I'm not 100% certain because I don't remember that part of the legislation, but I believe that that's good. 17.4, the Department of Social Services, working with the new National Disability Supports Quality and Safeguards Commission and state and territory agencies, should expand the coverage of worker screening requirements. Has anybody else noticed that they keep forgetting to bold the second time they say something? Like, up here they remember to bold it, and up here they have, but so many times, the second or third thing that they say is not bolded. It's not actually that important, but, consistency. Come on, guys. You can do this. It's your job. Anyway, 17.5. Well, one of them, anyway. Department of Finance and the Department of Social Services, working with the new National Disability Supports Quality and Safeguard Commission and state and territory agencies, should improve, streamline, and harmonise worker screening processes for care and support workers. Look, I want to say, definitely improve. Streamlining would be nice, but I'm not the biggest fan of streamline as a phrase. A lot of the time when people say streamlining, it often means cutting essential or beneficial services in order to make it simpler. And you don't actually need to do that in order to make something simpler. Streamlining means, increasing the speed with which you go from A to B, which is great, but not if you really should have had other steps in between. So I'm not a big fan of the term streamline and how it often gets used. And how the implementation that is not necessarily good. Harmonizing sounds good, but that's one of those words that sounds good, but what does it actually mean? Because harmonizing, it can be good, but people's needs differ. We don't need everybody to have the same skill set. We need diversity of skill sets. So depending on what that is actually supposed to mean, obviously that's relating to the screening process, right? But because people's needs are fundamentally different, you might actually want different screening processes for different needs. But, improving is still good. Anyway, 17.6. The new National Disability Supports Quality and Safeguards Commission should be resourced to strengthen compliance activities and communications to respond to emerging and long-standing quality and safeguards issues and market developments and innovation. So that's basically saying we need to give them enough money to actually do their job. So yes, they should be given enough money to actually do their job. And obviously it's not just money, but yeah, they should be able to do their job. Recommendation 18. Reinvigorate efforts to urgently drive reduction and elimination in the use of restrictive practices. Yes, but let's see what they're actually saying here. 18.1. All Australian governments should agree a joint action plan for the meaningful collaboration and a stronger focus on corrective actions against providers to reduce and eliminate restrictive practices and review interventions and practices that may be harmful. Yes, this is a big problem, the inappropriate use of restrictive practices, but there are times where restrictive practices are necessary, if not desirable. For example, using my case, locking me in the house is a restrictive practice. It is a necessary thing. So I don't want that eliminated. And I don't want it reduced in my sense in some of these regards. But I am an outlier. And a lot of the way that restrictive practices are used is fundamentally inappropriate. So I completely agree with this as I believe it's intended, which is specifically to combat abuse. but not all restrictive practice is abuse, and I'm concerned that this is treating it as if it is. 18.2, the new National Disability Supports, Quality and Safeguards Commission, working with other agencies as relevant, should work with behaviour support practitioners and providers to urgently improve the quality of behaviour support plans, enhance quality of life for participants, and eliminate poor provider practices. Yep, that sounds good. 18.3, the new National Disability Supports, Quality and Safeguards Commission, working with state and territory agencies, should better support providers to deliver on their role in reducing and eliminating restrictive practices. Okay, look, I do agree with this, but this all seems to be about, hey, this is what we need the new National Disability Supports, Quality and Safeguards Commission to be like. Why is that not its own section? Why is that over here in markets? I mean, I guess it's a support system, but that's not really a support system. That's... Yeah, I'm not sure why it's in this section. It's important, but it seems weird that it's over here. It really feels like they should have either had a separate section for this, or it should have come under the admin section, or, you know, an enforcement section. Alright, so hang on. Before I read this out, the reason why questions like this I feel are important is because what things are packaged with, in theory, tells us something about what their opinions are and what their perspective are on those particular items. If they are placing the Quality and Safeguards Commission as something to do with the market and support system, that might tell us about how they view this. It's not about regulation, it's about PR. That's not. I'm not actually saying that might be what it's about, but by placing it under the, you know, because I'm presuming they're not placing it under the market section. They might be, but like it tells, you know, if they're placing it on the market section, that's telling you that their focus is on regulating the market. If it's on the support side of things, that's telling you that it's about providing support. But the Quality Safeguards Commission shouldn't be either of those things, right? These are the people who should be setting up what the rules are and enforcing those rules across the board. These are the people who should be funding research. These are the people who should be critiquing. And if that is all, you know, and a significant portion of this is under here, it says that the market and support system are being deprioritized. Because think about it, most of the stuff in here seems to have been about the Supports, Quality and Safeguard Commission. So this name feels wrong. Or if it's right, if we split this into another section, like about 2/3 of the recommendations I think would leave this section. So that's why it seems weird to me. That's why I'm like, it's good stuff, but what is that telling us about their priorities? Anyway, 19, embed effective quality and safeguarding institutions and architecture across the disability support ecosystem. 19.1, the Disability Reform Ministerial Council should agree a disability supports quality and safeguarding framework. 19.2, all Australian governments should prioritise greater collaboration, consistency and timely exchange of data and information to ensure effective quality and safeguarding, including expanding the coverage of the NDIS Quality and Safeguards Commission to become the National Disability Supports Quality and Safeguard Commission. Yeah. Yeah. There's not anything specifically bad here. It's just, why is that not part of the same section? I don't know. Anyway, 19.3, the Australian Government should ensure the National Disability Supports Quality and Safeguard Commission has the resources, power and approach to proactively and effectively regulate the disability supports market. Okay, so once again, we have another action saying, hey, we need to make sure that they have resources. So we have multiple for that. This one just seems to be saying, hey, we need to make sure that, you know, we need to just let this pre-existing department becomes this brand new department, which there are reasons to do that. Like, starting an entire new branch of government and then tailoring that branch of government and then closing down the old one is a lot easier than going, hey, we've got this previous branch and we have all of the rules and we're adding new ones on top of that, and now we have to discuss what ones to take out. It's a lot easier to actually make it from scratch than to deal with legacy content. So I get that, I approve of that, but why is that in this section? Why is that not its own section? And why is it completely separated? Why are those two completely separate sections? Why are 18 and 19 separated? I'm not sure. I feel there must be a good reason for it, or at least a reason for it, but I'm not seeing it, to be perfectly honest. Alright, so I think I can stop the recording here. That is all of, I can do that as a separate video. Yeah, look, some thoughts on the whole. One, once again, they did not talk about it nearly as much as I thought they would. In fact, almost every single point that I had and that I was looking for was in these first couple. And then after that, there was barely anything for me to comment on. And that's a bad thing, because it means that either they haven't actually genuinely, what was it? Where was the one where they actually said that they needed to reframe, wherever it is. No, that's First Nations. Anyway, there was one, here we go, develop a new pricing and payments framework, right? That is everything. Almost everything I spoke about, and almost every single, not almost every single complaint, right? But so many of the issues that I have identified with the NDIS have their roots in fundamental mechanisms of the economics of the NDIS. And this is the only part that really seems to address that. And it's not much. It's barely anything. It's an acknowledgement that there's an issue and that they should do something about it, but it's not actually acknowledging what the issues are. So this could actually be not addressing any of my points. This could be addressing something completely different. Heck, this could actually just be, literally, this could just be, hey, we got the numbers wrong, so we're going to change what the numbers are. That's not a changing of the mechanisms, that's just a changing of the numbers. And the mechanisms are a big part of the problem. So, yeah, this might actually do nothing for all the issues that I said, everything I've said in this video. This whole section might address basically none of it. So, I have concerns, and this is probably, I'm probably going to think up some good questions to bring up in Town Hall that is going to relate to this, and basically asking, hey, why are you not doing this? What are you doing about this? Why do you only have one point in all of these points that addresses that at all? And it might not even address it. Yeah. Yeah, the short of it is, basically nothing that I've said seems to have been directly addressed. They might be indirectly addressed, but none of it seems directly addressed, and the focus and the attention that I personally thought needs to be paid to the economics of the NDIS, it's not here. It is not here at all, especially given how much of this has been about the new Quality and Safeguards Commission, which feels like it should have been its own separate section. So it really feels like they were just padding this section out, to me. Yeah. I'd be interested to hear what other people's opinions are. I'm still shocked at the fact that, that's one point. Where are the rest of the points? I'm still shocked at that. I'm shocked at so many points in here. Yes, it looks good, but it's a thin veneer, whereas a lot of the other points, I'm like, this doesn't seem like a thin veneer, this actually does seem like a good thing, or whatever. So much in this section just felt like a thin veneer, or like it was actually for something else entirely. So, I don't want to say that any of this is bad, but I definitely do not feel like it's anywhere close to enough, and it still left me feeling like they don't understand some of the problems. And I feel like they should, right? I've said time and time again that the people who are doing this review are experts. These are people who, each one of them individually, are more qualified than I am to talk about any of this stuff. Which is not me saying, oh, look at me, I've got qualifications. It's all of them are more qualified than me. So the fact that they're not paying attention to this, as far as I can tell, means one of two things, as far as I can tell. Like, either one, they're not aware of these issues, and I feel like they should be, or two, they realize they can't do anything about them. Changing, like, economic reform is a very hard political sell. It is very, very difficult to do. Any amount of economic reform, any amount of, like, regulation of the private sector at all is hard to pull off. And this seems to be pretty weak. Like, looking at it, it seems to be, hey, we're creating a new department, and it's going to be that new department's job to come up with this stuff. So we're not doing it now, we're just setting up the department that one of their jobs is going to be doing this. But they're going to have 20 other jobs as well. So all of these economic issues, yeah, they're going to be constantly deprioritized, and the current system is what we're going to keep moving forwards with from an economic mechanics perspective, which means that all of these points are going to be so much harder. How are you going to retain staff and encourage people to do this job if you are creating an economic system that fundamentally prioritizes short-term, high turnover, low qualified, yes qualified, but low qualified staff? And I don't see anything in here that will change that. I do not see anything in here that is actually targeted to that. The closest to that is, hey, we're making a new department that at some point may address this. And aside from that, it's, this bit, this point. Every single economic issue is 1 point. And it shouldn't be. It definitely should be more than that. So, yeah, I'm definitely disappointed. This is what I expected. Like, to be honest, I almost expected this not even to have 1 point. But, yeah. Anyway, that'll be it for this video. I will probably do another recording to 5-year transition. Okay, I'm looking forward to reading that, because that is going to be talking about the process of actually implementing these things, and how long it'll take. We're almost done here. I mean, there's still a whole lot more articles to read. There's so much more to this. This is like a 300-page document, and we barely covered the dot points. But yeah. I'm gonna have to, I'm definitely gonna have to read this outside of the stream, I think. I'll stream the rest of these, but I'm not sure that I'll be able to stream the deeper reading of these things, and the pages and pages of context. And that's something to remember, is that while I am disappointed, I'm reading the dot points, right? I'm guessing at what some of these things mean, and or what some of these things cover. And some of the things that I've gone, hey, this looks like it might be a thumbs up, when I read the context it might be a thumbs down. And vice versa. There might be some things that I went, oh, this looks like it's a problem. And then I'll read it in more detail and go, actually, no, they did the right thing. That is actually brilliant. They came up with a solution that I didn't think of, or they're addressing a problem that I didn't even know was there. So context is important, and, we're not, the only context we're getting is what I can think the context is. I mean, heck, they had a reference to a change of legislation, and I couldn't remember what even that section of legislation was. So, this is just kind of knee-jerk reaction, but my knee-jerk reaction of that section was disappointment, whereas the first section was overall positive. So, anyway, that'll be it for now. I will do another stream shortly, and I will see some of you then. Farewell.